Welcome to the introduction to the 2017 ICER Mentoring webinar. I'm Una Shortall and I'm live from Brussels. This is the first of two webinars as part of the mentoring program. I'm delighted to host and moderate this webinar today on International Women's Day. It's a great way to celebrate International Women's Day. And this mentoring program is the fourth year of the program. And we are delighted to have two speakers with us today, whom I'll introduce in a moment. What today's webinar is about, it's about explaining what the program is. I'm going to introduce Natalie McCoy, who comes live from Portugal. Natalie is the Head of International Affairs at ICER, the Portuguese regulator. Welcome, Natalie. And we also have Catherine Bennett. Catherine works in international issues for NARUC, and Catherine's coming live from Washington, D.C. Good morning, Catherine.
Morning.
Just to explain the structure of today's webinar. Following each speaker, we will have some time for questions and answers. We'll also allow some time at the end for questions and answers. So please do send us in your questions. There is a chat forum. You can see it on your screen. So if any of the audience have questions they'd like to pose, please do send them in, and we'll allow 15 or 20 minutes at the end of this hour-long webinar to address as many of those questions as possible. The webinar, I should say, is also audio recorded, so if you happen to miss it or if you have to leave early, don't worry, it'll be posted on the ICER website and you can listen to it later. So what is the mentoring program about? As I mentioned, this is the 2017 program. What it does is it pairs mentors and female mentees from all over the world. And we're delighted to have 26 pairs in this round of the mentoring program. They come from 18 different countries. We have 11 men who are mentors, the rest are women, and 8 of our mentors are at commissioner level, so the various highest levels within our organizations. What this program does not do is that it does not set out a standard formula for all mentees to follow. And the reason for that is because every mentoring relationship is unique. And so it's up to you, the mentee, under the guidance of your mentor, to decide what you want from the mentoring relationship, to decide what goals you're going to set, and to work on that journey together. But we do have plenty of tools to help you along that journey. So the first one is the overview document, which I'm sure you've seen. It's been posted to all of our mentors and mentees. Within this document there is an agreement, and that agreement is essential that both of the mentor and mentee sign at the beginning. It helps define the ground rules, in other words, how often you will meet, what format you will use to meet, so is it by telephone conference or is it by Skype, the frequency and so forth. It also sets out what your overall objectives are. And of course this mentoring relationship is very much based on confidentiality so that you can have a good trusting relationship. The onus is on the mentee to drive the relationship. So in other words, you're responsible for your own learning. So that means the mentee should organize the meetings, obviously follow up, make sure you attend all of the meetings and follow up on the actions that you've been allocated. We also have a number of checks and balances to make sure that everything's working smoothly. The first one is next month in April. We in the ICER Secretariat will contact each mentee to make sure that your mentor has made the first initial contact with you. The onus is on the mentor to make the primary contact. Thereafter, it's up to the mentee then to insist on scheduling meetings. So if for some reason that you haven't had contact, or for some reason their mentoring relationship just isn't working out even at the early stages, do let us know and we will reallocate you another mentor. I should say that the mentors take fine responsibility in guiding you. They take that responsibility very seriously. So they're here very much to help you and to make the most of the time you have with them. Another document we have developed is what we call the mentoring journal. And this contains key dates. So for example, our second webinar, this is one of 2 webinars, and our second webinar will be in July. And there we hear from pairs of mentors and mentees. And this is something you should discuss with your mentors, whether you would like to be a webinar speaker on that July webinar. But the journal does much more than that. It also helps you plan your meetings and helps you record what you've said and what actions were agreed at those meetings. Another thing we have is what we call the program reviews. So we have a mid-program review and we have an end-program review. And this is because your feedback is very important to us so that we can improve each round of the program as we go forward. New this year, for example, is a monthly email that you will get from me directly. And I might set you a challenge, or I might suggest a topic that you could discuss with your mentor. But as I've previously alluded to, it's really up to you, the mentor yourself, mentee and mentor, to decide ultimately what topics are relevant for you and which ones you want to discuss. So you're not obliged to follow each of those topics. Some new resources as well, which are inherent in the journal, is what we call the What to Talk About list. And this is a helpful resource because it can be sometimes very daunting for the mentee to know what to talk about and to come up with new ideas all the time. We also have a recommended list of best books, blogs and broadcasts. This is an ongoing list which we will continuously try to update. So if you have any recommendations yourself, please do submit them to us in WE and we'll share it forward. Another resource I recommend is the WE stories, which we publish on the ICER website. And these real-life stories of these women who've written their story, or of your mentors' stories or experiences, are very useful because they help us see potential paths which we may not have already considered. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Natalie McCoy, who's going to tell us a little about what it's like being a mentor on this program. Natalie, glad to hear from you.
Right. Many thanks, Una. I hope I'm coming through now nice and clear. Yes, it's actually very exciting to be on the call International Women's Day, and we're even celebrating it here in the office. All of our ladies are getting a fresh tulip to mark the day and the occasion, and it's quite nice to have a community, and there's a women's lunch, in fact, for the whole staff. So everybody has different ways to celebrate, and I'm glad we have some as well in our different institutions. But coming back to the mentoring scheme that we're discussing this afternoon, I wanted to maybe pick up on the introduction and the overall orientation that Una just gave us, and maybe bring it back, because I know some of us are probably thinking right now, well, okay, well, how does this thing actually work, and am I ever going to be able to confide really in a stranger? How to get to a stage where I'm comfortable sharing things with someone halfway across the world, maybe? And perhaps maybe just to ease your mind and reassure you, 2 things. The first thing is that there is help to get you started and to keep you going as well. As Una mentioned, we have the trustee manuals, we have the overview program, we have the journal. I'll probably insist too much on the virtues of that journal, but I'm actually quite a big fan, and I found it very useful in my mentoring relationship. So I'll come back to that probably. The second thing is to remind everybody of the nature of this relationship. It is very much personal relationship between two people, and the objective is to create a safe space and to build trust and to maintain that trust over the course of the year. As Una said, every relationship is unique, but I thought perhaps I would share with you a few maybe basic ground rules that can really help develop the relationship and end up in a successful mentoring. Number one, I think this is probably the foundation for everything else, is to not be afraid to be honest, to open up, to say something maybe embarrassing, to ask a question that you're a little bit uncomfortable, and to share personal experiences and doubts. And this seems difficult with a stranger, but you won't always be strangers, and you'll get to know each other, and you feel, hopefully, comfortable in a position to share those kinds of things. I mean, the advantage of this particular kind of e-mentoring is that you do have the chance to speak to somebody who's in some ways anonymous and is outside of your day-to-day work environment. So you have the chance to open up and to say things you might not in other places. So it's kind of a guilt-free expressionism, if you want to think of it that way, of discussing. Then second thing, don't stand up your date. If you have an appointment with your mentor or your mentee, try to keep to it. Schedule your calls. Make sure you've allowed enough time for the call, a full hour perhaps, and just keep to the schedule and to the dates that you've agreed together. Unless really force majeure intervenes and you have to reschedule, but do that in advance and in good time, and mutual respect. We're all busy in this day and age. Thirdly, do some homework, as it were. Prepare ahead of each call, review the discussion from the last call, and use the journal that Una introduced briefly. Okay, who keeps a journal at our age? Do we have time for journals and to be writing every day? But really it is quite useful. It is very helpful just to keep notes during the call, to write down some keywords of the discussion to help jog your memory as you develop your relationship over time, and also to just even plan next steps for the next call or for a topic that you want to develop further. It really is a helpful way, keeping track and also helping you to organize your thoughts and remember what you said and what the mentor or mentee said back to you. So I recommend that. Fourth, just a reminder that it is a two-way street. This is a relationship. It's not a lecture series. It's not a how-to guidebook for all the answers to every problem we've ever had. It really is a partnership where you exchange, where you have an open dialogue, and where you share experiences, personal experiences, professional experiences, things that you want to discuss. So those for me would be four basic ground rules or building blocks that you can use as you start this new relationship, as it were. Maybe for the mentors, some specific points. Remember that it's not necessarily about coaching. It's not about giving free advice and solutions. It's actually about asking questions and encouraging thought and self-analysis in a way by the person. So your role is more to provide information, options, to share examples and experiences that might be relevant to a situation. So it's difficult because it's often many of us tempted to, oh, well, you should do this, or perhaps why aren't you doing that? So it's quite a balanced, constantly tell yourself. Actually, it's more about getting the other person to share and explain for themselves what they think they want and should be doing. But it is quite a constructive process, but it's tempting to criticize or to judge, and that becomes difficult in terms of the development overall of the partnership. And then for the mentees, some other points perhaps. I think the bottom line is that ask and ye shall receive. So in that sense, it's up to you to be clear about what your expectations are, what your needs are, to explain to the mentor what you hope to gain from the relationship, what areas you want to focus on, and to really guide, say, the mentoring in the direction of what you need and your particular issues and priorities. I think for both sides, what I would say is that I think it's the adage we have for most things in life. You get out what you put in. You reap what you sow, and life is what you make of it, and all these other famous expressions that we have, but which all are quite true at the end of the day. As much as you invest in any given thing is what you will be able to expect in return from that investment. So here I think it's important to remember that it will only work if both people are, as it were, dancing the same tango. So perhaps that's enough theory and famous expressions of life and purpose, but what now? How does it actually work, and where do I go from here? Well, the first thing is to set up the first phone call and introduce yourselves and start to get to know each other a little bit. Maybe just going over your CVs and your story or the city you live in. Start with something not too the meaning of life and fundamental, and build towards the more detailed and deep discussions that hopefully you'll get to as part of the mentoring program. How do you get there? I think the mentoring agreement that Una mentioned is actually very helpful. That, as well as the top 10 ranking, it was a list of issues that the mentees had in their application. So, for example, with my mentee, what we did was we looked at her list of priorities, the ranking that she did of the different areas of focus, and we used that to build kind of our menu for the duration of the mentoring program. And then, based on that, we spent a couple of calls on each of her priority areas. So we dedicated time, 2 or 3 calls to each issue, and that allowed us to do some follow-up and to build, and then even to exchange articles or to have a little bit of homework in between the calls on whatever the topic was that we were, the chapter of the book, as it were. So that was actually quite useful. And then another thing that's quite a good way, it's as an icebreaker and also as a conversation starter to share some experiences and opinions, were to consult some of the videos, the blogs, the articles. And Una has mentioned that they've actually now put together a small compendium of examples that are actually quite clever. And if you each watch them in your free time, if you have a moment, and then you come together and discuss them, it can be quite interesting the opinions that come out and the reactions that you each had to the same material. So that we did a few times with my mentee, for example, last year. And it was quite fun. And the videos, these TED Talks that are quite popular now, they really do get you thinking in the real life, shall we say, comments from those speakers. They're a good starting point for things that most of us relate to or have even experienced in our lives. So I would try those out as well. In terms of the continuity and continuing to grow the relationship, I would suggest already planning your agenda for the next call at the end of every call. So when you're about to finish, say, what do you want to talk about next time we talk? Okay, well, let's talk about networking skills. Right, well, ahead of our next call in 6 weeks, maybe you have it every month, maybe you have a 6-week cycle, it's up to you and your relationship. Ahead of our next call, let's both watch this video or read an article and come prepared to talk about networking or the issues or the doubts or the experiences that we have on that area. So it helps to keep you going and also to prepare in advance so that you have something to discuss during the 1 hour perhaps phone call that you have together. So that's perhaps another tip. The last one maybe is to book in advance, like with a good restaurant. If you schedule your appointments for the next 6 months and you have a cycle, then you both have that blocked in your diary. You know it's going to happen. You're planning for it. It becomes a routine and a good period of time when you know you're going to be in touch again. And it creates the rhythm and some certainty as well in terms of the relationship. So if you can, try to schedule in advance and try to keep to the schedule, as I mentioned earlier. So those are just a few personal tips and overall kind of orientation. I'm not sure your relationship will have to be adapted to your style, your needs, so it may be completely different from my experience, but that's entirely the point of the mentoring, is to be able to do that one-on-one with your other half. So any questions, of course, happy to discuss.
Thanks, Natalie. That's a great first-hand experience of being a mentor. Natalie's joined us again this year as a mentor once again. You alluded to a couple of things, one being the resources that we have, the ICER resources. Which was your favorite of the ICER resources?
Okay, now I'm like a small walking publicity for the ICER work and all the materials that you've prepared, but I think I already hinted that I'm in love with the journal, but I really did find it quite useful, and it has a template already ready-made, ready to apply for every meetings. I think there's 10 meetings worth of sheets that they really give you the what are we going to talk about, what are our priorities, what are we going to talk about next, and it helps to provide the structure for a conversation. So I found that really helpful from one meeting to the next, and to grow into filling out, as it were, the slots of conversation and topics that we should be addressing. Sorry, Una, I think I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Let's move on to Catherine. Catherine, you're back with us. We'd love to hear from you and your experience as a former mentee. You with us, Catherine?
No, and as well. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can.
Thank you. Excellent, Natalie, for your explanation of what it's like to be a mentor, and thank you, Una, for organizing us in this webinar. I don't have many comments, but I wanted to highlight takeaways as a mentor. That first of all, the experience for me was very positive. My mentor was supportive of me from the very first call that we had, and it was very professional, and I couldn't be happier with my experience with her. It's a really nice feeling that someone else is taking interest in your career and support you, and they have no skin in the game. They're just there to listen and provide resources and consider alternative ways for you in your career, and you.
Catherine, it's jumping in and out, so maybe you could dial back in a minute, and I'll follow on with Natalie, because it's just breaking up a little, and I don't want us to lose some of the good advice you have for us. So Natalie, when Catherine's just maybe dialing back in, one of the things she mentioned there was...
Oh, I'm sorry. It says it's being lost.
Yeah. You just play away with Catherine, with the technology, and we'll just discuss some of the things you've already raised. So Natalie, one of the things Catherine was mentioning is the importance to believe, for someone to believe in them as a mentee and to support in them. How do you get that across to your mentee? That because it's important to someone in order to have self-belief, it's important for someone else to tell you, look, you can do this. How do you get that across?
Yeah, that's true. I think actually this is probably one of those life lessons, that we all have to deal with at different levels in all of our relationships, and it's not an easy thing. But I think a lot can depend just from active listening, from being interested in somebody and what they have to say and what they're worried about in the topics that they want to discuss, and to show an interest and to really be present in the discussion. And that shows that they're important, that what they think about is important, and that somebody cares and is listening to them. And I think that also helps deal with self-confidence and feeling valued or important in a way. We've all had moments where, for example, we thought, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. I must be the only person going through this situation, and it's so alien and so difficult, and how am I going to get through it? It can be at work or personal, but sometimes you feel like you must be the only one who's ever had to deal with X problem. And then actually, if you discuss with somebody and you're able to share that, you realize, actually, I'm not alone. Other people have had this. There are ways to deal with it. And you start to lose some of the self-doubt and maybe the fear and confusion that you had in those moments where you had nobody to share it with. So sometimes it's just about communication that really makes a difference in terms of self-worth and confidence of how to address anything.
Okay.
In my experience.
Thanks, Natalie. Catherine, you there? Let's go again. Let's try again.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now better, yes.
Okay, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm not sure what the last thing I said was, but I agree with Natalie in all her points. Just want to reiterate that building trust takes time, and you shouldn't be expecting some kind of anything magical, because we're all people, and it takes multiple times of talking to them before you feel comfortable sharing more challenging topics with a stranger. So I think everyone should have realistic expectations going in of that it takes time, and that you should put in time, because like Natalie mentioned, you get in what you get out what you put in. So I think that's one of the keys to having a successful relationship. And similarly, that you can build trust with someone who is country than you, who speaks a different language than you speak, and to learn that similar challenges are faced around is really cool, and learning how other people handle those challenges is also really interesting, and helps you new ways to kind of think about things in your job, in your career, and in your life even. And my mentor was kind of a coaching style, and that worked really well for me. And she would kind of small assignments or things to think about, or things to read, or exercises, and it helps engage from meeting to meeting and have something concrete to talk about. And usually you have discovered something or something has come up at work that you want to discuss with them once you reach the point of trust. So in summation, I really have enjoyed my experience, and the program is very, so anyone can come in and just read the instructions, and they can understand exactly what to do, and most slides. So I think it runs itself if you kind of if you follow the rules and
Very good. Very good, Catherine. And one of the first rules, of course, is to set yourself some goals. How important is
and I think I think it's important, and like I said, the guidelines and the journal prepared by the Women in Energy folks, mostly Una, I think, are really helpful in moving the relationship along. And I think if you have for each session, as well as what you think you want to achieve in the relationship, you kind of know how to orient yourself from meeting to meeting. And I think kind of on a logistical, if you're having trouble kind of finding time and coming together, that you should just kind of, like for instance, in me speaking with someone in Europe, I had to wake up. It was worth it, and it doesn't interrupt your day. So once you kind of get it in your head that this is I'm going to have it on Friday morning, then it's much easier, and you can kind of just build it into your weekly routine or monthly routine, or however often you choose to meet. And I think kind of presented about it makes it more productive and makes you as a mentor take things very seriously. And I to follow the journal and to follow the guidelines are really good ideas, and I understand there are sources for this set of mentors and mentees, and I think that will also be very useful for them.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. I should have mentioned earlier, I'm a former mentee myself of the program, and like Catherine, I found it really, really valuable. And one of the things I ask myself as a mentee is whether I was the type of person that I would like to mentor. And by that I mean, was I open? Was I committed? Was I curious about the experience of my mentor? Had I issues to talk about? Was I comfortable maybe not talking about some issues and talking about other issues? So, I mean, that for me was a good reflection, to try and be a good mentee, because, you know, if you are curious, it makes the mentor's life a lot easier. Are there any tips that you have for yourself for mentees, Catherine, from your experience?
Yeah, including what you said, that being open and being curious are key elements of being a mentor, because it opens the relationship up to you know, not only just receive advice and information and recommendations, but to kind of have a if that works for the pair. And I think one thing that just from can assume that the mentor is already interested in you and interested in mentoring someone and giving this kind of special way. So you don't have to worry that they don't care about you, or they don't go above and beyond to help you with whatever you're whatever you're working on in the moment. So I think kind of start from a place of like, we're both in this together, and we want to have a mutually beneficial relationship, and go from there.
Okay, I think Natalie summed it up quite well earlier when she said it's not a lecture style relationship. It's a two-way relationship, and I'm always very surprised when we get the feedback from the mentors themselves, and because I feel they give up a lot of time to do this, but I'm always overwhelmed by the amount that they get out of it themselves. You know, the mentees bring a slightly different perspective. Maybe they're managing people themselves and they just haven't thought of this issue, or they really develop their own listening skills, for example. We also have a network here to support mentors if they're really facing a difficult question and they're not sure how to tackle it, and they can play for time a little by saying, look, I'll come back to you. And we have a confidential line where we have very established, very experienced mentors to people, and our mentors can consult those, again, in a very confidential way, not revealing who the mentee is, and asking for that advice. So there is help there for the mentors as well as the mentees. Okay, I'm just checking to see if we have any more questions from the audience. I see one has just come in, and it is, do most mentors and mentees focus on technical issues such as regulatory subject matter, or on personal development issues? I think it's better to pose this question to Natalie rather than Catherine. Natalie?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I have a very good experience in this one, because my mentee last time, we had nothing in common on our day-to-day work life. She was an engineer and she was working on emergency restoration plans. A complete different universe for me, actually. But that wasn't what we discussed. It wasn't what she needed, I should say. She wanted to discuss other things, career development and management and networking, and so it was on the basis of what she needed that we were paired. And we lived in different time zones, and she had totally different day-to-day life than I have at the time. Well, I still don't do emergency restoration plans, actually. So she still has a different life than I do. But it wasn't about the concrete work in our case, day-to-day, what deadlines did you have to meet. It was more about the office environment and building her career and what her priorities were and how best she could take those forward. And she was very organized. She had a plan, a career plan, you know, where are you going to be in 10 years? She could answer that to you. And our discussions were about how to get there. So it very much depends on the personal relationship and what the two sides, mainly what the mentee is expecting and what they want to focus on as part of the mentoring program. But absolutely, it doesn't have to be purely technical, and it doesn't have to be purely soft skills. It can be a bit of both.
Okay, maybe just to jump in myself, just to add something, because I have the overview. I have the privilege to chair this Women in Energy group, so I get to see all of the application forms, and I can tell you it's quite a mix. I think as time goes on, people delve into different issues, certainly, but we found it sometimes a little bit challenging to find a mentee with very specific technical experience that certain people wanted. So certain people just want, you know, to know more about maybe sustainability or renewables development in a different continent, or but others, you know, are looking for something slightly different, a little bit of coaching or a little bit of guidance, a little bit of well, where next? I'm now I'm at a manager level and I want to, you know, step up and become a leader, and how do I go about that, for example. So it really is a mix. And that's why I say, as I said earlier, if you're not happy with the person that we've paired you with, do let us know. It shouldn't get in the way if you're not the same technical background, but maybe it's not just working out. So do let us know, and we can sort around. We have a large database of mentors who are more than willing. In fact, this year we had more mentors in the end than we did mentees. So there is somebody else out there if it's not working out. Okay, I have another question as well here, which is what's the best advice you can have to give to plan a career rather than simply work to keep the job? Is this something either of you have come up or discussed in your relationship? Catherine, do you want to go with that?
Yes. Actually, this theme had come up a few times with me and my mentor, and she had kind of encouraged me to think about them all together, and especially since I'm imagining most people in the Women in Energy Network are interested in more than just one and stopping there. They're interested in long term. They're interested in growing and developing, and I don't know if it's the best advice, but what I can say is, you know, to treat your job as the same, and to think about where you want to go and what you're doing now is it going to get you there, and what how you're thinking about the short, long, you know, medium and short term, and kind of let that guide you to where you want to go. I don't know, maybe some insight as well.
Okay. Natalie, a question specifically for you. Have you had a mentor, and how have they influenced you?
Actually, I've had, I think, any number of informal mentoring relationships, which perhaps I didn't realize that's what they were at the time. I've only participated in an official scheme through the Women in Energy, actually. But I have had various, I would say, professional relationships which did help me to understand myself and to develop, and also to ask myself the questions about where am I going, is this the way to get there, what do I have to do in order to advance, and how should I go about that. So not such a formal arrangement as I think this program has the advantage to offer people in a very structured and safe way, even very explicit way, as opposed to having the chance of having what some people call a sponsor in a professional environment, somebody who's supporting you, who's encouraging your growth, who's pushing you along either within your own company or in your profession. So it's good also, if, aside from a mentoring relationship, to identify in your life a potential sponsor who can serve that purpose for you. Even in your daily life, somebody who knows your value, who's going maybe to help you understand your options, your potential, and to provide you some encouragement and some perspective. So this is maybe inside your work environment, whereas this mentoring program now offers you a more extra international kind of relationship and chance to have a more neutral and safe discussions about things that maybe you don't also want to discuss somebody who's very close to you if they're difficult. So that's perhaps my experience, actually.
Okay, I'll just share with you as well maybe a nugget of information that I gleaned from one of the application forms of one of our mentors, and she is a commissioner, and she said that her biggest promoter was herself, that she was her own biggest ambassador, that we can't sit back always and you know, it is good to have a mentor, and it's fantastic if someone sponsors you, but you need to give them something for them to believe in you. And so you need to self-promote. And in fact, we've developed some good material on that as well, on how do you go about that. How do you sell yourself? And it's not something that sits comfortably, particularly with a lot of women. But there are some, we have some material on that too, that will help people.
Yeah. Actually, just to come back on that, one of the blogs and TED Talks on the list that Una shared with all of us is one from somebody called Sheryl Sandberg. And she makes a clever observation, if you watch the whole video, about the fact that women are too shy about their accomplishments, and they don't take the credit for themselves of successes or results that they have achieved. And sometimes if you ask a man, this is her theory, if you ask a man, how great paper, yes, I worked really hard, I'm awesome, and I did it myself and I'm the best. If you ask a woman, that was a good paper, oh yes, well I had some help and I couldn't have done it without the team. And the attitude of many women is not necessarily to be pushy and to promote oneself, and sometimes to say, oh well, I had help and it was lucky, or everybody else contributed. Whereas maybe in a male society there isn't that hesitation to take credit, and so it is something that sometimes we women should maybe tell ourselves, oh, you deserved it, you earned it, you should take credit for it, and you should congratulate yourself and make sure other people are aware of it as well. And in fact, it was one of our American colleagues, I can remember her very well, in a previous ICER mentor, or was it a Women in Energy event, but it was one of these Women in Energy venues, and she said, women apologize too much. We're always saying we're sorry, and you should never apologize. In a professional environment, you get on with it, but stop apologizing. So those are different things that we don't realize we do, but that they're just small little reflections of our need to be a bit more proud of ourselves.
Yes. Thanks, Natalie, for recalling that one. That in fact was is on the mentoring video, which we developed ourselves some years ago when we were setting up the mentoring and the WE initiative, and We didn't get any outside help, so we did a resource poll to see what talent we had, a handful of people, the steering committee, and one of the ladies was handy with a video camera, and so we hijacked the EU-US roundtable some years ago, and we went with a video camera and we interviewed several women, and that was one of them who said, yeah, don't over apologize. So I mean, but there's that video is still on our ICER website, and there are very, very good reflections in that. So it's about 10 or 12 women who really weren't really that well prepared, but yeah, it was very good. So do look at all the resources that are out there, both our own, as I say, on our website, in particular all of the women in energy stories, and we would encourage the women mentors, mentees too. You don't have to be at a particularly senior level, should I say, to write your own story in terms of how you came to energy, what the challenges were, and mostly tell us about, you know, what lessons you learned along the way in terms of your successes. So we're always looking for stories, women in energy stories, and that story telling has been so popular that we had to open it up to non-regulators. In fact, it's open to everybody, anyone working in the women in energy, any women, I should say, working in the energy sector now. And it gets published as well in the Chronicle. We select at least 2 for the Chronicle, but the others are all published on our website as well. Okay, I'm just checking to see if we've any more questions who've come in. If not, I have one here which I'll ask both ladies, which is, how do you constantly challenge your underlying beliefs and assumptions? Is there anything that you do to take stock and reflect? Is there any tips you might have? Catherine, do you want to have a go at that one?
Sure. I think the can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I think part of the answer to the question was in the question, because if you're trying to your underlying beliefs, or that you think something should be a certain way, typically you're not going to answer in the moment or in the heat of the situation. You have to think about it later. You have to reflect, kind of amass the data to see maybe, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, or maybe there's a better, you know, my mentor suggested I think about things like this instead of how I was thinking about it before. And the key to kind of, let's call it new ways of thinking, challenging assumptions, is and reflection. And that's not to say that you need to meditate in your office every day for 30 minutes, but, you know, if something is changing, it's important to think about it and think about how you want to handle it, and not just continue on the same way you always, then you never grow.
Very interesting. So inward reflections. What about outward reflections as well? Is there some ways we could maybe, Natalie, change our views in terms of broadening our experiences, which might change our own underlying assumptions, because our insights are based on our own experiences. So if we open that up, maybe we could. Any views?
No, I think it's a very good point. I think I mean, there's a fine line between self-doubt and not being sure you've done the right thing or you've thought about it the right way, and actually being open to other people's criticism, other people's perspectives, and other experiences that come across your path. So I think it's recognizing those moments and being open to them. And sometimes, I mean, people say you don't learn a lesson unless you've made that mistake first. And the only way to really change or to learn something is by making the mistake yourself. I'm not sure that's true. I think sometimes you can learn it by a third party, and just being open to understanding what's happened to somebody else. And say, okay, well, maybe I won't do that. I saw that he had this problem, so I'll avoid that when it's my turn. So it's also reacting to stimuli and to your environment and being aware that there are other solutions or other ways to deal with something because you've seen other people do them as well. So I think this comes back to the being open-minded, I suppose, but it really is being receptive to the experiences that you see around you and maybe taking some of them on board. And part of that, I think, is constructive criticism because it does challenge what you thought was the right answer or the approach for the project that you wanted to take forward. And some people do have, I'm right and this is the way it should be and it should only be this way. And it's hard for them to adapt or to change to in a team environment, for example, to somebody else's suggestions. But it's important to always try to step back and challenge yourself, to think about it from that other person's perspective, and maybe they are right, and maybe they have a good suggestion. So empathy as well, and putting yourself in somebody else's position is actually quite powerful, I think.
Okay, that's very interesting, wise words there from Natalie, and that just talks to a certain maturity, I think, as well. You know, you'd never get a teenager to learn from someone else's mistakes, but in a professional setting, we should certainly, and that's the benefit of having this sort of confidential relationship based on trust, where the mentors will also share maybe when something didn't go so well, and the lessons that they've learned, and that's both, you know, that's a growth potential for you to learn from their mistakes. So there is that if you can develop your relationship to have those sort of candid discussions, I mean, that's a really successful mentoring relationship. Okay, so far today we've heard about the importance of trust in relationships. Catherine has talked about goal setting and preparation. We've also talked about review, about giving the mentoring relationship time to develop, that we can't expect to answer all the questions immediately, that you'll think of new things as time goes on. Natalie spoke about planning, though, having a plan from the beginning and scheduling meetings from the beginning. And as the relationship evolves, new topics will come up. Your workplace situation might throw up something that you hadn't planned, but there needs to be a lot of flexibility. And of course, your mentor will be very flexible. We're running out of time. I don't see any more questions coming in. So I think I'm just going to wrap it up a little bit. I have a few words to say, obviously to thank our speakers. I'd also like to very much thank our mentors, because they very much generously give up their time to nurture our mentees. A massive, massive thanks to the mentees for taking the challenge of joining the mentoring program. You are the remarkable female talent within our organizations, and that's why ICER has developed this. It's for your benefit, and we know our organizations will benefit as you grow. We've seen time and again that individuals, if they're given the right support and they want to strive ahead in the career, that they will actually do that. So if you have someone who believes in them and the appropriate support structure, you will get there. And we'll hope that the ICER mentoring program provides both of those things to you. As a mentee, former mentee myself, I can advise you to be proud to say that you're a mentee, and whether that's saying it to your line manager or whether it's saying it more publicly on LinkedIn. The reason I advise that is that it's a great reflection. It just shows that you want to progress in your career. That you want to learn from somebody who's gone ahead of you. It's nothing to be ashamed of, quite the contrary. So I'd commend all women for taking that step. It just shows that we're not naive enough to think that we know everything, but rather that you still want to grow and continue to grow in this sector, and that you see a massive value in this mentoring relationship. Certainly some of the we stories definitely speak to the value of mentoring, so make the most out of it. There is much more material on our website. There is the we videos, the we stories, there's lots of topics and so forth. We're also on social media. We have a we LinkedIn page and we have a Twitter page, so do follow us. Send us your suggestions for books and blogs and so forth. And if you have any questions at any point, just send them into our us. You have all our details in terms of the we email address. We would like to get your feedback as well. For some of you, especially in Australia and New Zealand, it's the middle of the night for you, so you won't be joining it now. But do listen in to the audio recording and send us your feedback so that we can improve going forward. Natalie and Catherine, thank you again for joining us today. Thanks for dealing with the slight hiccups with the technology, Catherine, but we got through it. And thank you very much for your insights. And just as a final word, if you really do want to give something back as a mentee, the best way to actually thank your mentor is to become a mentor yourself in time. They don't need any other thanks, so that should be the goal for all the current mentees. Okay, I wish you farewell and the very best of luck, and we'll be in contact very soon again. Thank you. Farewell.
Many thanks. Bye-bye.